This is Malcolm Simmons and I'm looking today at starch and carbohydrates. What you will learn: the two categories of carbohydrates, the huge increase in our consumption of carbohydrates, the problem with sugar, a major carbohydrate, how it is killing us and what to do about it. One of the most important ways to stay healthy is to cut down on your intake of all types of sugar or carbohydrate. Carbohydrates or carbs can be broken down into two categories. Added sugar, including white, brown sugar, honey, jam, cakes and biscuits, fruit juices and concentrates, sodas or fizzy drinks, and many other manufactured foods, many of which contain added sugar. Then, the second category, there are starchy foods or carbs, which consist of most of the diet for the majority of us. They include bread, rice, potatoes and pasta. And of these foods, 95% of the mass of these foods become sugar once you've digested them. And in my mind, there's no doubt that the high sugar content of the 21st century diet leads directly to increased levels of obesity, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, dementia, and other degenerative diseases. So let's have a look at how this has happened. First, the added sugar. Sugar itself, sweets, cakes, and so on. Now, in 1800, we consumed on average 10 pounds of sugar a year. 10 pounds. 200 years later, we're consuming 120 pounds a year. That's a skyrocketing in the amount of sugar we're eating. And this huge rise in the intake of what is such a powerful chemical has been a major factor in the increase of obesity, diabetes and other degenerative diseases. And it shouldn't surprise any of us when we see it's such a huge increase. The other category of sugars, the starchy food or carbs, started increasing about the same time in 1800, when at this time the wheat and barley that we were growing rocketed because we just learned more efficient ways of producing it. And these carbohydrate foods edged out a good proportion of the vegetables and protein that previously had been in our diet. So we were having more and more of these sugar-laden foods, either the strong sugars, pure sugar, or the foods with hidden sugar like wheat and barley and bread, etc., pasta. Now, the problem with sugar is that over that time, since 1800, we just haven't had as much time as we need, which you need to look at in the certainly hundreds of thousands of years, to evolve to deal with some new factor like that amount of sugar in the diet. And there's so much of it that ends up in the blood. Our bodies have not yet evolved to deal with this 12-fold increase in sugar in 200 years. And the result is the obesity, diabetes, cancer, etc. that I mentioned earlier. If we are to stay healthy, there's tons of evidence that we really do need to reduce our sugar intake dramatically, sugar in all its forms. So obviously we should minimise the added sugar in our diet from sweets or candy, biscuits or cookies, cake, soda or fizzy drinks, and fruit juices, which are very high in sugar. And drinking a fruit juice is very much like drinking a can of Coke. So added sugar in our tea and coffee should go immediately, and that's quite an easy way to cut our sugar intake by just knocking that on the head. And if you're like me, after a few days you'll get used to it. And also, manufactured foods contain massive amounts of added sugar. So whenever you're buying something manufactured, if you have to, like a cooking sauce, for example, there's tons of sugar in 99% of those. They just taste so sweet. You don't need all that sugar. But on top of that, the added sugar like that, it also is going to benefit us to minimise the carbohydrates in our diet, which means cutting down on the bread, rice, pasta and potatoes. Now, it'll take a few days to get used to a new dietary regime like this, but being human, we do adapt quickly. If you do change, you'll find probably you get used to it quite quickly. I know when I cut right down on rice and potatoes and pasta, it was a bit of a shock for 3 or 4 days, but after that I really just got used to it, just eating a lot more vegetables and more salads. So we just need to get used to extra vegetables in place of potatoes. So have an extra couple of vegetables with your meal and cut down on the rice, pasta. Maybe have a quarter of the amount that you normally would. And then substitute other foods for one that I know will be difficult for a lot of people, the bread. And a lot of people are eating this 2 or 3 times a day, and that's a lot of food which turns into sugar going into your body every day. A huge benefit is just to max out on the salads, have a lot more salads and grated vegetables and make these a bigger part of our diet. It's no exaggeration to say that sugar and carbs are killing us. Obesity, heart disease, diabetes are with us in a way that they just were not in 1800 or even 1900 before we started eating so much more sugar in our diet. So as a nation, we really need to slash our carb consumption if we want to live to a healthy old age. The chances are much higher of doing that if we will boost our vegetables, ramp up the salads and raw veg we eat, and increase the protein in our diet. Sugar and carbs are literally killing and maiming us as we age. Few of those people responsible for our health, certainly including the government, I wouldn't trust them. And unfortunately, it also includes most doctors. Few doctors will tell us this stuff. It's one case where our own research will tell us much more than our usual medical advisors will. So research yourself, search out videos on YouTube. There are some excellent ones out there on these dietary matters. So what you learned, the 2 categories of carbs, the huge increase in sugar consumption since 1800. There's been a 12-fold increase. The problem with sugar, how it is killing us, and what we can do about it.